Hey guys, this is Phil Galfond from BlueFirePoker.com. I'm going to pick up where I left off a few weeks ago. Finally back at home, and so I have this footage that I didn't have access to for a few days. Um, but I played a session across 4 tables of 2550, and I've already made a couple videos out of it. And this will be the final installment of that. And, as always, if you haven't seen the rest of the series, I recommend you go back and watch it for game flow, for reads, things like that. On the top right table, we have take chip heads up, and I talked about at the end of the last video how I decided on a min raising strategy on the button. Kind of just wanted to try it out. I think it's probably the best. I think it's probably the best strategy against a lot of opponents, but it's something that I'm not used to. So I'm kind of experimenting with it and seeing how he adjusts and how it affects the overall match. When he three bets, I think he's a very aggressive three better by reputation at least. I haven't played with him a ton, but I'm gonna four bet get this in pretty happily, especially early in the match. I think it's good to four bet. First of all, well, for two reasons. First of all, it's important, I think, to kind of set a tone and give me some momentum. Or momentum might be the wrong word, but just like to be pushing him around a little bit. And the second reason is I think people expect your first four bet to be light, so I expect him to jam there pretty weak. He calls, and I'm not positive what to make of that call. Probably like suited broadways, potentially. No, it's got to be like suited broadways or something slow played or like suited mid cards. On the bottom right, I called a raise from the hijack in the big blind. It's a little bit loose of me. I might actually prefer just to fold there, even though it seems nitty. Check flop, and I decided to check call turn rather than go ahead and lead. I think it's close between the two decisions, and I'd like to do this to mix it up a little bit. The bottom checks through, and at this point I think I'm just going to go for value, expecting him to have a hand with showdown value given that he's, checked on like a very c-bettable flop and a very c-bettable turn. On the top right table, I'm going to go ahead and stick with my kind of small c-bet sizing in these 4-bet pots. When the pot gets so big, I think it just makes it tough for him to play. I'm not very happy about this flop and the situation, given that I do think he has a lot of suited broadways or like Jack 10 suited, Jack 9 suited, 9 8 suited, I guess. But for the most part, I think like a lot of Queen Jack suited, things like that. But I think this is the best way to kind of start the hand. And unless he wants to jam right now, which he might, it allows me to see a turn and river usually for cheaper. The end on the bottom right, slow played ace jack, which I don't really agree with. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it for deception, but this is a turn that I'd expect him to bet like every time. So I guess he's going for like trying to rep pocket sixes, which is definitely okay to get me mostly to get me to bluff and value bet too thinly. So I guess there's nothing wrong with his play, but he's going to want to bet the flop and the turn, especially the turn, I think, with a lot of air. So on the top right, I have a decision, and I think it's a close one, to be honest. I can either check back, or I can jam. I don't think he has Queen Jack, just because I believe that he would have jammed the flop with Queen Jack. So I do think I'm looking at like Jack 10, Queen 10, King Jack. I don't think he has kings or tens. I mean, kings is possible, but probably not. I think tens jams pre-flop, ace king jams pre-flop. So I think very often I'm looking at a king or a 10, and I actually have decent equity against those hands. Not good equity, but he could hero fold a king, and I think should definitely fold a 10. And I decided to jam here. I think it's close, but I definitely am okay with with jamming. Had the turn not been suited 9, I think I like my jam a little bit more, just because it looks less draw heavy even. And he does have king jack suited and picked up the flush draw as well. I think he probably would call there without the flush draw. But yeah, I do feel okay about that hand. I think the flop decision and the turn decision are both debatable. You can just give up there on the flop, given the range of hands he should usually have to call 4-bet. Although, I'm completely readless on him in terms of, I know he's a tough, aggressive player, but I don't know what he calls 4-bets with. But I mean, you would have to assume that it's those type of hands. So nothing too interesting. I min raise and c-bet with my jack 4 and then give up. And I decide to fold 10-5 offsuit. I think he's probably going to 3-bet a lot. And also not fold to, well, we'll see if he folds to the min raises. Ace-10 suited against an aggressive player. I think that the best line is to 3-bet, planning to 5-bet jam, and not be excited to get it in good when you 5-bet jam, but expect to have a good amount of fold equity and not to be in terrible shape. But he just folds. So top left, I'm in position. I call, raise from the small blind and the big blind. I think very, very standard flop call. I don't think there's really anything else I can do here. And I mean, you can raise, but it doesn't accomplish very much. I could try to get to showdown with this hand. I can very easily call 2 barrels and get to showdown and decide if I want to hero call the river. Obviously, I have a little bit in the way of implied odds and some cards I can bluff as well. He bets a turn, and I call again. And I hit the straight with the flush card hits. Still, extremely likely that I have the best hand. And he leads. I don't think I could do anything but call. And he did have the flush. I think in his shoes, I prefer a check raise. It's close for sure, but there are a ton of hands like 6x that I'm just going to check back. But I'm going to have trouble calling with those hands as well, just because I don't think he bluffs this 3 very often because of how often I have a 5. When he checks, I'm going to have to bet a 5 and consider calling a check raise. And also, my 4x or 10-8 or missed clubs are very likely going to choose this board to bluff, or choose this river to bluff at. So I think he picks off a lot of bluffs by checking here, as well as, potentially gets me to bet call it off with the hand that I had. And I think his sizing on the river is like... I'm not really sure what he's attempting to do because it's not a sizing against which I can raise a 1-card straight. If the flush didn't hit, then I would understand this because I would be raising my 1-card straight. Let's say he had the nut straight. If the flush didn't hit, he can do this, get a lot of value from a lot of hands, get me to raise my 1-card straight, and then get the jam on me. Here, though, I'm not going to raise a 1-card straight when the flush hits. and a spot where he can't be betting too thinly. Um, so I think that his smaller bet sizing, unless he just thinks, I call more often, so this is the most profitable play, which it, certainly could be. Um, but I think that there are a lot of spots where betting this size makes good sense if you're trying to induce, or like either induce a bluff or get them to value raise too thinly. But that's a spot where I'm not going to make a mistake and value raise 5. And so I have a couple decisions on the top two tables on whether to fire the second barrel. I think the top right is less good of a spot to fire the second barrel because it's kind of more of an obvious spot. People expect me to fire on the ace. Both of these spots I have a gutter. Um, I think the top left hand is a pretty good spot to barrel because he occasionally will fold a 4 or 5. He also can have like king high. Okay, I have some action, so I'll talk to you guys soon. Hey guys, I'm back. We were talking about on these top two tables where I have gut shots, which I prefer a continuation bet or a second barrel on, and I think that the top left is far superior. First of all, just because I have the overs to second and third pair, as well as a nut straight out. But also because this is a board I think he doesn't expect me to barrel on as much, but he actually still has a pretty weak range. He has a lot of king highs in his range. 4 or 5 probably has to fold. He could have floated the flop and have to fold unless he bluff raises, which would be another problem. And on the right table, it's just a spot where they expect you to barrel a lot. He very often check calls the flop with weak ace highs, so then I'm drawing almost dead. So yeah, I don't remember what I did, but I prefer a bet on the left and a check on the right. Hey, that's what I did. Cool. And no reason to hero call with Jack High here once the 10 hits. We get check raised, and it's an awkward spot. I mean, obviously we don't have a hand, but I really am inclined to 3-bet bluff. It's just so difficult for him to have a 3 um, in his pre-flop calling range. Like, King 3 suited, Ace 3 suited, maybe Ace 3 offsuit. And I think that's it as far as threes that he should be playing. I don't think. I guess pocket threes also. I don't think he's going to play this way with the set. He could, I guess, but he's much more likely to raise the flop, first of all, and second of all, he may not raise the turn if he has a set. So I think I'm very often looking at like King 10 or something like that suspected a double barrel and didn't want to call. So they decided to check raise. So I decided to put in a 3-bet here. Um, I don't think there's a ton to say about it. I think that it's just very likely that he's bluffing and very difficult for him to come back over the top. And I don't know a lot about how tough he is. There are a lot of players I think that don't bluff in this spot because they know how uncredible it is. And he's probably smart enough to realize that, but I think still it's just so difficult for him to have a 3 that it's just a numbers game, and just more likely that he decided to spaz bluff with something than that he actually showed up with the 3. On the top right table, I checked down King 10, and I'm going to value bet the river given that it looks a lot like I have a 6. He min bets for me, and I just call. And we have the same hand. So he calls on the top left. I hit the jack, and the flush hits. I think that he could have played a flush this way, or a flush draw, especially like um, 8-7 of diamonds. Maybe decided not to check call again and wanted to check raise, or yeah, King X of diamonds. Although I would expect that to call more often. I think I could go for the barrel here, but I don't rep a flush very well. I rep a straight very well, but I don't think I'd be three betting and putting myself in a spot where I'd have to fold to a jam with my flush draws. I think I'd just float against his check raise on the turn, and then bluff some rivers or hope to hit. So I think I actually have to check this down and give up. I'm sure I thought about it for a while. I do expect him to have a three here pretty often, or maybe a set. He shows up with eights, which is I don't know, kind of head explode. Not in a bad way. I just don't understand what his plan was. Um, I don't know why not just check call the turn. Unless he was just knew I was gonna spaz induce that play, but take a hand stronger than eights to do it with. I'm not really sure what he's doing there. But he did own me, and I sucked out. So on the top right, I 3-bet ace-king and c-bet the flop, and the question is, do I fire the second barrel or do I not fire the second barrel? And I think it's a close decision. I lean towards betting, I think, in this spot against an opponent who's capable of floating the flop and, capable of laying down second pair. The good thing about betting is you get to realize your equity with your six outs as opposed to checking, and sometimes he bets to protect a six, and I just have to fold when I had plenty of outs, as well as some of his floats. And he jams, and I have to fold. Can't hero call ace high here, I think. It's very difficult for him to be semi-bluffing. I mean, he could float the flop with some backdoor draws and have turned him, but it's just much more likely as a pair, two pair. And yeah, I'm just looking back at that hand, trying to figure it out. And still, I don't totally know what his plan was. So Jack 4 on the top right, I think I can actually go for 3 streets of value. There are a lot of hands that are going to call this turn. Pair plus gutter type hands. And it's a spot where I very often 3-barrel if I barrel the turn. So, bottom left table. This player opens in the hijack, the small blind 3-bets, and I decide to turn my hand into a 4-bet bluff. I obviously can't cold call with ace 10 offsuit. So I think it's a good hand to 4-bet bluff with. And the sizing, I think, is pretty standard. I don't think it's at all a mandatory play, but I think it's one that you need to make some of the time, and this is as good an opportunity as any. And awkward spot now as I flop second pair. He called. I think he often has ace king, ace queen, more often ace queen, maybe some suited broadways, some jacks or tens plus. I'm not doing too well against that range. I actually kind of prefer check back and just fold. But my small bet size is always kind of the easier option in these 4-bet pots. and he makes a small check raise. And this is a really credible bluff, or like a good spot to bluff. He reps jacks really, really well. However, I have a lot of hands that I can fight back with, and ace 10 offsuit is not the hand I want to choose to fight back with. I think he has it more often than not, and I think that if I'm really suspicious here, there are just better ways for me to fight back, or different parts of my range that I can fight back with. So I think I just have to fold. I get 3-bet. We have 10-9 offsuit. We're 200 big blinds deep. I think I can peel profitably, and obviously use my position to make some moves, or try to flop a pair and show it down. I flop nothing on the driest, almost as dry as boards get, and I think folding's the best play. You can raise here occasionally, but you can't get carried away with it. Otherwise, your bluff raising, or sorry, your raising range is like 80%, 90% air, because there aren't a lot of value hands I can credibly raise there. Like King Jack, I usually don't raise. So that would mean I need a set, or like nut flush draw plus gutter, or I don't know. All right, so on the top right, this short stack 3-bets, and I decide to slow play. I think it's the best option. Let him. I don't know. I don't have any reads on him, but hopefully he somehow just spazzes. So I'm gonna slow play the whole way. Or obviously, if he has queens or tens, he's probably just going for a few streets of value anyways. I could jam here. I think that jamming is probably the play if I know that he's competent. But since I don't know that he's competent, I think it's very possible he could just, like when somebody shows up with a short stack and 3-bets the first hand, I mean, obviously you can have a hand, but it's very possible that he's just an idiot. And so I want to give him some rope just in case he is. And the difference between calling and jamming here shouldn't be much at all anyways, even if he's not an idiot. But maybe he has ace 7 offsuit, and if I call, he's just going to jam any river. Just because. Because there are players that do that, and even though I don't think that's the most likely scenario, it's definitely something that happens often enough that it's worth making the call rather than the raise there. As it was, he had King Jack, and I just coolered him. I check call the top left with deuces. I think check folding might be the best play. I mean, I don't have good equity against anything, and there are a lot of cards he can double barrel on, and I can't call a second barrel. I think I should have just folded the flop. And I think I have a mandatory bluff now, given that I'm at the absolute bottom of my range. And, it's pretty easy for me to have a 10 or a 5. It's very difficult for me to have a bluff, actually. I mean, I usually like to think about my opponent's range and what kinds of hands I'm repping, but occasionally it's nice to just I don't know, kind of use game theory as an excuse and just bluff when you're at the absolute bottom of your range, and then you can never feel bad about it when you get picked off. So that's definitely something I'll use occasionally. On this top right table, I guess I have seen him delay c-bet, so I'm fine with my check on the turn. I think going for two streets of value is also a viable option. On the top left, he checked back 8-7-4 and folded on an ace. Not that strange, but I think it's something to note, especially if you're going to be playing somebody heads up for a long time. And he actually had the king and was kind of just, value bet protecting. But I might have been able to get two streets of value against that hand. Top right table, I don't really want to fold. I think actually check raising plays a little better than check calling, but I'm fine with check calling with my backdoor straight draw and flush draw. And I could turn my hand into a bluff, as it's very credible, but I also just can try to show it down. I think a check raise bluff is actually maybe the best option in that spot. But yeah, he just had air, and I was able to show it down. But the good thing about a check raise in this spot is, first of all, when he has air, it just goes check check. Often you win. Occasionally he stabs with air, and you check raise, and he folds, obviously. Excuse me. And also, since nothing missed, I think it just looks very, very credible. The downside of a check raise bluff, as opposed to a lead bluff, is I think it's actually a little more likely you're bluffing when you check raise than when you lead on this board. Since when you lead, you really can't have anything that missed. You can have ace highs or bottom pair, but you wouldn't turn those into a bluff. However, when you check and he bets, you could turn your ace highs or your bottom pair or your fives or maybe even a jack if you want. You could turn those into a bluff. So even though it does make it a little more likely you're bluffing, I still, as far as ranges play and just, yeah, as far as the way the hand plays out, I don't mind check raising as a bluff there. I think it's might be the best play against a lot of opponents. And always a hard hand to play on the top right, but I'm just going to check call and take it from there. And that makes it a little bit easier. I don't think leading's a great idea. I mean, it wouldn't be that bad to have a leading range on this 9, and I think the problem is it looks insanely credible, which means it's not a bad play if I had floated with like king queen or I don't know jack x somehow. Although most of my jack x's have a pair. I don't mind leading with some air here, and if I started doing that, then I could lead with my 9. But since I don't really ever have a leading range, I decided to just check and hope to get another bet out of him. And I guess you pot control a little bit too if we happen to be beat. Bad river, obviously. If he bets, I don't hate turning my hand into a check raise bluff again. I know I'm suggesting a lot of check raise bluffs and then never making them, but it's difficult for him to have the boat given that I block the 9, and it just looks insanely credible. However, I think he'd expect me to have raised the turn with most of my boats, so I decided just to fold, and I don't think he's bluffing often enough to try to pick that off. So on the bottom left table, I'll back it up a little bit. I see bet into two people on a 3 flush board with top pair, top kicker. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't. Okay, Moleswe, excuse me. led into two of us. I call with top pair, top kicker. I'm trying to think what I put him on. I think he has a lot of like king queen with king of hearts that is really just trying to get value against a range. Um, could also he's capable of check raising the turn, so I decided to check back. Although I don't hate betting there. It actually betting might have been the better option because now he plays very well on the river. I think. Um, Correctly value bets two pair, whereas he would have check called two pair and then checked the river, so I kind of lose the same against those hands. Although I don't think it's very likely he's bluffing. I can almost just fold the river. Um, but betting, if he was leading with some kind of garbage that has a little bit of equity, I get him to, I get to protect my hand. I think betting the turn would have been the better play. And if he checks the river, I'm actually going to check behind, I think. Well, maybe not. I don't remember what I did, but the problem is he's pretty tricky. So he's capable of the check raise here, but I think king queen with a heart seems very likely, or like ace jack with the nut heart. And I think he shouldn't expect me to bet very often, so he shouldn't be going for too many check raises there, I would think. Alright, so that actually is all the footage I have, unfortunately. I guess this video is a little bit shorter than I would have liked, but I'll make it up to you guys with a longer video in the near future. I hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, any questions, comments, feedback. I am finally back home, so I'm going to be able to respond to feedback. I know I've been lacking in that area quite a bit, but it's been an insane schedule, and yeah, I've just been insanely busy, and also continuing on my massive downswing. So I've been kind of consumed with that, but I'll try my best to respond to comments for this video and from here on out. And thanks for watching. I will see you guys next week. This is Phil Galfond for BlueFirePoker.com. Take care, guys.